This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome into episode number 47 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, alongside my sidekick and my usual partner in crime, the Doc, from Doc and Jock.
Vito, did you enjoy the 4th holiday? I know you told me you were going to go out of town a little bit and that you were off the grid. You were like, please do not text me anymore. Your topic ideas, your show ideas. Don't text me anymore. I'm out for the weekend. I'll hit you up on Tuesday. How was your weekend?
Yeah, I couldn't deal with anything else from you now. But I was off the grid definitely because there was no cell access, no service there where I was in Beaverton on Wixom Lake. So I was over there, great time on the water, great weather for all of that with some great buddies. And we really enjoyed the water, enjoyed being out there together. And we haven't been all together, part, of one unified body hanging out in a long time now because they've done some stuff, but I haven't been able to always tag along lately because of being busy. And work has caught up with me, and while traveling in the month of June to the 6 cities for Somebody football, kept me busy and out of the loop with them. So I was able to reconnect and be with them this holiday weekend, an extended holiday weekend for all of us too, as I left on Friday night after work, and my brother came with me, and then we hung out in Beaverton on Wixom Lake from Friday night until Monday evening, I would say. Monday evening, about 6:30, we left to return home to lovely Delta Street on 60-mile Moravian. So we had a nice long weekend, Doc. How about yourself now?
The weather was beautiful. Absolutely great weekend. I enjoyed it thoroughly. The 4th of July is always, a fun time, kind of a kickoff to the summer. Get out there, have some fun with the kids, and, get a chance to also, kind of peek in with the Tigers a little bit. A great weekend series versus Tampa Bay, and then the start of the series versus Cleveland. And I guess just to kick it off, I was a little bit surprised at the way Game 1 shook down all the way around. From the fact there was a 2.5-hour delay to the fact that they clawed back, but then you lose a couple players along the way. But in the end, and I think I'm starting to hate to say it, but I'm starting to feel it, Cleveland is just better than Detroit. I mean, it takes 10 games in a row to tell me that, but I think that at this point in time, no matter what the Tigers try to do, Cleveland is just that much better. And you saw it. The Cleveland was able to, get to Daniel Norris. They were able to hit the pitching. They were able to hit Rondon, who had been, relatively
your boy
successful.
Rondon.
He was, Napoli is just a Tiger killer. He's hit now 14 career home runs, I believe, against Detroit. And he's done a great job against us, and he's just been a guy that we're having a hard time getting him out in key situations, and you lose the 10th game of the season consecutively to the Indians, and now you're starting to hear the talk that the Detroit Tigers are 44-29 when they don't play Cleveland and 0-10 versus them. They'd have a fantastic record. They'd be on pace to win 100 games if they just did not face Cleveland. And they'd have a relatively strong season in terms of record if they just won half the games against Cleveland. And so, it's just, when you look at it, it's disappointing. You kind of realize that, the Cleveland Indians are just better than the Tigers, and we might have to get swept again, maybe lose the first 12 games this year against Cleveland.
Well, you know what? Napoli hit his 17th bomb. He hit, I believe, 17 home runs all of last year and drove in 50 runs. So he's going to slow down. I know we've talked about this with me bringing up the theme of the Indians slowing down at some point because of their hitters. But their starting rotation, 1 through 5, they have Salazar, who was dealing against the Tigers Monday night at Progressive Field. And the Tigers couldn't touch him outside of a few home runs. And they tied it up at 3 runs apiece. Then your boy Bruce Rondon comes in and ruins it all. Ruins the 4th of July for every single Tigers fan out there watching that game last night, Monday night, Doc. Rondon is not the guy in the 7th inning in a tied ball game against the Indians, a club that you lost already 9 straight games and now 10 consecutive contests against in the Cleveland Indians. And you got to learn a way to beat them, because if you don't, you're going to lose the division, and by more than a few games, as right now they trail by, I believe, 6.5 in the AL Central. So as you said, the difference maker for the Tigers this season has been their inability to beat the Indians, which has been because of the Indians' strength as a whole with their rotation 1 through 5. That is their biggest strength and the reason why they're ahead of the Tigers by that 6.5 game margin right now. So if they keep it up pitching-wise, they're going to stay around the top of the division. But if their hitters slow down, that's where the Indians could tail off. But then, also, that being said, because it's a two-way street, the Tigers' pitching has to pick it up. And the injuries to Jordan Zimmerman, a neck strain, him being placed on the 15-day DL, and Daniel Norris exiting Monday night's game early, too, because of an injury to him. He's been lingering all year long with the injury bug, that has affected him constantly and way too often. With that being said, speaking of Daniel Norris, and that is our prize prospect from the David Price trade at last year's trade deadline, and now him going down with this injury, not looking good for him and his prospects of pitching consistently in that 4th or 5th starter role in 2016. And then Zimmerman, who has not been that ace caliber arm lately. He has not been as good as he was to start off the year.
See, it was in the back of my mind. Jordan Zimmerman, before the 4th game, before the July 4th game, they announced that he's going to be on the DL. Jordan Zimmerman, the only other time he went on the DL was when he had the ligament surgery. So now he gets this big contract, and now he's out 15 days on the DL with a neck strain. I was like, no, because you know what that means? Who's going to start game 2 in almost a must-win versus Cleveland in the second game of that series, in a series where everyone's thinking maybe one game at best? I mean, Jason Jarvie, funny guy, host of the Motor City Sports Rant podcast, he said the over-under was half, and he was going with the under. And now you're counting on Anibal Sanchez in game 2. That injury to Jordan Zimmerman came at the worst possible time. Couldn't believe it.
They had just moved him back to the pen where he deserves to be right now, Anibal Sanchez, definitely. And what was the over-under, by the way, for runs allowed?
Ooh, you know what? What did Cleveland score, like 20 the last year? 20, I think maybe 22 they scored. But you know what? I would say 20. I would think the over-under would be 20 runs because their offense has been great. They're playing at home. But, the first game there was weather, but they still scored 5 runs.
It. Well, you know what? Off of Bruce Rondon's arm, though. Rondon allowed that big 2-run home run to break the tie to give the Indians victory, the 10th straight victory against the Tigers. A club that has been good outside of playing the Tribe. And now the thing is, how much better off are the Tribe? Well, once again, it's based on the strength of their starting rotation. And you look at the numbers, all very good ERAs. And I wrote a scouting report, by the way, for the Free Press. At the point of publication, when I accumulated all these stats and submitted this story last Friday before the series against the Indians, at that point in time, the 5 starters in the Indians rotation had an ERA at least of 3.50. That at the worst, 3.50 or below. Now that's very impressive. And then there's Salazar, who pitched very well once again Monday night. But regardless of all that, and where the Tribe rank in ERA with the AL best, American League best ERA right now, and as of last Friday was at 3.42. And Detroit, as of last Friday, ranked 13th out of 15 American League ball clubs. That's the difference maker right there. So the Tigers have to pick it up pitching-wise. And if they do, they might have a chance. But as we said, what's hurting them now are the injuries. And how critical is the injury to Jordan Zimmerman? You really summed it up. You really did eloquently in saying, just bringing up Anibal Sanchez and how he has to be used now in the rotation in the place of Jordan Zimmerman. That's a big-time downgrade from Zimmerman to Anibal Sanchez. And now, hopefully, Zimmerman figures it all out and gets rectified himself after coming off of the DL and is fine for the rest of the season, because if he's not, then the Tigers have an even bigger issue in the starting rotation, Doc.
So, I guess you have to put it on the table. If the Tigers get swept by Cleveland and then they go on and they struggle, maybe go 500 against Toronto, does that shift your thinking a little bit in terms of maybe what the organization will do, that maybe potentially they might add pieces or decide, okay, we know that we're going to have to really, add pieces in order to compete with Cleveland, but you're relatively close to the wild card.
Yeah, they had the second wild card spot as of the day before, as of Sunday. So going into the series against the Indians. And if you're that competitive where you can fight for a wild card spot, you got to buy at the deadline.
So how devastating would a sweep be to Cleveland at this point in time in the season?
They've already been swept how many times? I mean, it's like nothing new, right? And they can still contend for the wild card spot. But it even hurts them for that, obviously. Hurts their positioning for that. If they keep losing enough to the Indians the rest of the way, that's a lot of losses piled up once again. And already 10 against this club in the Indians. And I would say it would be, well, it's devastating for their chance of getting the division title. It is, because you got to beat the team that's in first place head-to-head to have a chance to catapult that team for first place in your respective division. So it would be devastating. But once again, it's still early enough before the All-Star break. If this was after the All-Star break, it'd be completely devastating. Where right now, it's of a minuscule magnitude, I would say, if they do get swept against the Indians in this series. Because then you look at it this way, too. Well, they get swept, but then maybe they pick it up against the Blue Jays, who are not that great of a ball club right now. They're not the Indians, who have 50 wins now, by the way, the Indians do. So when you get to 50 wins this early, that says something about you and about how they're legit, and maybe more than I've given them credit for. So maybe they're just going to struggle all year long against the Tribe. And especially, as I said once again last week on the podcast, if the Indians deal for an impact bat or two and then get Michael Brantley healthy and back into form when he comes off of the DL and is 100% healthy, that is key, too, for the Indians down the stretch, having his bat in the middle of their order. And then Napoli keeping it up. Some aging vets keeping it up. So for me, it just might be the case where the Indians are a team you're not going to beat that often, so you have to worry about the wild card, which means you still have to buy at the deadline. It's just maybe you have more now to get than you would have initially because of an injury to a guy like Jordan Zimmerman.
Now, maybe you can look for me. Who's going to be the Game 3 starter? Is it JV? I'm hoping, but I'm not exactly sure. But with the Cleveland series, it's very important that they have to get at least one win. I think that once they get that one win, the monkey will be off their back. I do believe part of it is talent, in that Cleveland right now is putting everything together, offense, defense, pitching, bullpen. They're just a little bit better than the Tigers right now. But one win could get them off the schneid. They can really compete, because look what's going on in these games. The last couple games versus Cleveland, you've been in it a little bit. On Monday, you were down 3-1. Nick Castellanos, who's just having a great breakout season, has improved his footwork at third base, has trimmed down, has really acted like a professional in terms of how he's handled criticism. He's come back and had an excellent season, and he smashed that home run. And I thought at that point when I was watching, I'm like, okay, now it's 3-3. Now the Tigers have a legitimate chance. If they can hold on, if Rondon can maybe get some outs, maybe if that bullpen can do some things, maybe we can get this to extra innings and maybe get one. But Napoli comes up, and Rondon just... when you give up a fastball like that, Napoli destroyed the baseball.
He did. That was out of here. That was out of the ballpark right away.
But I just think they need to get that one win. Get that win, and I think then you can go on to the series versus Toronto and maybe have some more success. And maybe just get a split there in Toronto. So I just think that the series versus Cleveland is really, it came at an interesting time in that you're facing these good teams right after a series where you just dominated a team like Tampa Bay. And I legitimately thought when they had that epic comeback in that first game in the series versus Tampa Bay, that might carry them and might be something that would lift them. Vito, you don't see that too often where you're down by that much in the ninth inning and come all the way back to win the game. I thought that would be like something that would bond the team, something that would get everybody all together and maybe carry them to a run, maybe even a series win versus Cleveland, but it didn't happen.
They won 6 straight, after the weekend series against the Rays, and they swept the Rays in the 4-game set to make it a 6-game winning streak for the Tigers. Now, they lost the first game of the Indian series, which is the most crucial one now of the near future and heading into the All-Star break. And I think it's vital to pick up ground, and they did until now losing Monday night. But if they win 2 out of 3, they pick up ground against the Indians before the All-Star break. So I think it is vital to almost even win 2 out of 3 at this point, because that means you win 2 out of 3, you're still only 2-10 against the Indians for the season. That's still really bad, obviously. But it's something better, and then maybe you gain momentum going into that series against the Blue Jays, who can mash, and against the Tigers pitching, it scares me how well they can mash. The reigning AL MVP, Josh Donaldson, who's having another stellar season at the plate. You got him swinging mightily and hitting for power. You got all these guys that can hit for power in that Jays lineup. It scares me facing a weak Tigers pitching staff, who is even weaker now because of injuries to Zimmerman, because of injuries to Norris, which has forced now, as you said, Anibal Sanchez back into the rotation, a guy that I don't want to see in the rotation again anytime soon, honestly. And another guy that should have at least a diminished role, I'll bring up the name, a guy that you love, and Bruce Rondon, fire-throwing guy, but a guy that should not have been maybe used Bruce Rondon Monday night out of the pen.
Why?
I'm just going to say, because I would like a guy, Joe Jimenez. He's my boy. I'm going to bring him up again for the 33rd time this year on the podcast. He should have been in that game. If he was on the team, he probably could have been and would have been used in that situation. I just think, I know we don't have the proven results. He doesn't have the proven Major League track record. But you give him the chance there, and you see, and then you give him more and more reps as the season progresses, then he's even more ready for a role like that as the season progresses too, Doc.
But Vito, listen, you're not going to count on a guy that young to come in key situations. Look what's happened. Alex Wilson comes into the game in that first game, and he unfortunately walks two guys back to back, and he gets in a bases loaded jam. He gets out of it, and he gets out of trouble. We give the bullpen grief, and we say that, you know what, it's probably a weakness on this team, but it's starting to slowly round into form in that you got Rondon, you got the two Wilsons. Lowe is a guy that's going to be up and down. He's trying to work himself into form, but he's got stuff. So it's a little bit more of a confidence issue and a mechanical issue other than stuff because he's done it before. It looks like he's just a little bit off mechanically, and if you can get that corrected, you're starting to see the foundation of a bullpen that can do some things given an offense that maybe gives them a little bit more support, and maybe if they get into situations where they're not taxed. The starters haven't helped the bullpen all that much because they just don't go deep into games at this point in time. You only got one guy right now that's been a flamethrower, and that's Fulmer. Everybody else has just been really up and down, and the Norris situation, that's the worst thing that could happen, and then you had to go to the bullpen so soon in the series. You need them. But I'm a little bit more confident in the bullpen that they can maybe round into form with Rondon, with the Wilsons, and potentially if you add one more piece to that bullpen, then maybe you can get some innings out of them and not be so worried when they come in. But K-Rod's been ultra successful, and he's been somebody that I would kind of say, I know it's going to take a while sometimes, and I know he's not a flamethrower, but he's done his job. He hasn't blown too many saves. I know it takes a long time for him to get the outs, and that he's only featuring like a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, but he's crafty, and he's got the stuff to get people out. So we'll take it at this point in time. K-Rod's been okay. The bullpen's been okay. So in terms of the Jimenez, I would pump the brakes on that kind of talk.
Now, Dustin Mulliken being used in that situation, having to come in long relief, worst guy possible because you're facing the Indians, a club you haven't beat, and then you have to use him that early in the ballgame. I knew it was over. I called it quits. I watched the game, by the way, and I still believe I'm still a Tigers fan. But I said to myself and said to my dad who was watching it with me, this is over, Dad. They're not going to win this game, not against the Indians, not this year, man. And then Salazar on the mound that you're facing, who's still out there and dealing, you're not going to beat him. And luckily, they showed signs, though. I'll give the Tigers this much, which I don't know if this will carry over now, but they showed signs of life still, tying up the ballgame. They didn't mail it in because Norris had to go, because Mulliken was in, who probably is in the sharpest pitcher out there, and we know that from him being a career minor leaguer. They didn't mail it in. They still had a game there, and a game that they could have won. So I'll give the Tigers that much credit. I will, Doc. And what did you think when you saw Mulliken come in? Who I don't even know if I'm saying his last name properly, honestly. He is he's that foreign of a guy because he's been a career minor leaguer, Doc.
Listen, you're sending up and down Boyd, Ryan, Buck Farmer. You're sending these guys up and down, trying to find somebody that can be effective. And, everyone said it when he came up. You're like, oh, great. You look to somebody new, and it's a guy who's 31 years old and a guy that you had to just call up right away and have him drive from Toledo against the Indians. So when he came in, and of course he gave up the run, but he got himself out of a jam. And so, hey, if he can come in here and just eat up innings, what everyone's kind of noticing and what everybody wants is you need a couple guys that can come out of the bullpen that can eat some innings. That's all. But right now you got a series of guys that you can count on for maybe one inning or situational type things. But you don't have the guy outside of Anibal Sanchez, maybe Shane Green, that you can say, okay, can you go 5-6 innings in a pinch and not give up too many runs? Sanchez will go up there and dial it up and can get guys out. But when it gets into that third or fourth or fifth inning that he's out there, you know that he potentially could, at any given point in time, fall behind and give up key runs at that moment. You don't have the guy that you just say, okay, go out there, do your job, and put zeros on the board, which I know is probably an unrealistic expectation, but sometimes you just need that pick-me-up from the bullpen. And I think guys like Alex Wilson, Justin Wilson can do that. The guy that we have to hope for that comes around is Lowe. They've put a lot of pieces in place for him to be successful. They keep throwing him out there. He's got stuff. If you look at his stuff, he's got it. It's just he's got to be able to get ahead in the counts and not get into unfavorable situations. So that's what the guy I'm hoping maybe turns it around. And if Pelfrey continues to kind of slowly but surely turn it around, don't be too surprised if he's not out of the starting rotation. That guy can't be a starter. Everyone knows it. They're not. It's one of those situations where Pelfrey is pitching better. I give him credit. He is battling, but he's just not a starter. That guy could be potentially a guy that can go 3-4 innings and maybe help you out in that bullpen, but they're not going to do it. So, yeah, the bullpen is, I think for me, starting to slowly turn the corner into being a little bit more reliable, but there are still times for sure I won't be surprised if they go out there and get rocked. That's for sure.
And really quickly, the Tribe's rotation has Corey Kluber, a 2014 AL Cy Young Award winner, with the worst ERA of their entire starting pitching staff. How about that? 3.79. I believe he got rocked the other night in one of the Indians' recent losses. So that's why his ERA elevated to 3.79. I think it was at 3.5, right around there. So look at him, what he's done in the past, and he's got the worst ERA in your starting rotation. That says a lot about the strength of that 1 through 5 starting rotation for the Tribe. And then you got a guy like Salazar, who has the best ERA in the AL, the best ERA plus. So that's above league average. The best ERA above league average, almost 200 for his ERA plus is Salazar's right now as we talk here on July 5th. And then the league leading ERA as well for himself. Then Carlos Carrasco, his ERA plus is almost 200 at 182. So you got him at 182. And then you've got Salazar, both guys above 150 for ERA plus and almost touching 200. That's incredible for those guys. And then his ERA, Carrasco, is 2.56, which is close, very close to Salazar's league-leading ERA. So you got all those guys, plus Kluber, a former Cy Young Award winner, and then you also got Josh Tomlin, who's already got 9 wins, just out-dueled JV. We remember that game when I was there a few Sundays ago and had to witness that, and that was miserable. So 1 through 5, they're just way better. And does it come down to the talent level? I mean, I think you kind of already admitted it. You've kind of already answered that question, but right now, is that the talent gap, what we're seeing between the Indians and Tigers, Doc?
Talent and execution. Right now, Cleveland psychologically owns the Tigers. They know that they got the confidence. When you beat a team 10 times in a row, you got the confidence that, hey, even if the Tigers get out to a 2-3-0 lead, they can claw back. And they just do a little bit. They do a little bit more, the Indians, a little bit more than the Tigers in every aspect of the game. Pitching, defense, clutch hitting, talent, home runs, bullpen. They just they execute just a little bit better, and right now they're at home. And I'm really surprised that Monday's game was the first game that they have sold out in the season since opening day. I was quite surprised by that. They know it's a big series, and I think they know that, we can get out there and almost have guaranteed wins because we know we've crushed the team. Let's go out there and celebrate. It's the 4th of July, and the fans were out there in masses to cheer, and Cleveland delivered. And I'm hoping. Did you get a chance to look to see who the third starter was?
I did not look it up. No.
Thank you, Vito.
I'm looking up everything else here. So
no,
I was going to say really quick, those guys that I mentioned with the league ERA, the ERA plus, the league ERA, now the average for that is 100. So that means they're almost 100 points above. So not 200, but an ERA plus that is almost 200, like I said, that's incredible. But that would be 100 above the league average, which is set at 100. So if you're below that, then you're below league average as an arm, So that tells you something about the quality of your arm right then and there, using a little bit of an advanced metric to judge a pitcher's quality. So all those guys, very good quality. And Kluber, I was just looking too, FIP is fielding independent pitching, below 3. That's the best FIP right now in the Indian starting pitching staff. So he's got the worst ERA, earned run average, but FIP, which tells a little bit more about the pitcher's quality, says that he's been the best starting pitcher for the Indians this year. And you still have Salazar with 10 wins. Incredible. And now these next 2 games, 3 games set, play at 7:10 Tuesday night, 12:10 Wednesday night in the last game of the series against the Indians. How well will the Tigers fare? How many wins, or will the Tigers get a win in this series against the Tribe, Doc?
Oh, I put it at 1. I think that they're going to break it. I can't see a team beating another team 12 consecutive times. And the Tigers are mashing the baseball. And one stat that you definitely got to see and pay attention to is in the first game on Monday, Ian Kinsler went 0 for 4. And so he can't do that in the Tigers have success. He's a guy that stirs the drink. Him, V-Mart, and Miguel Cabrera have to come up clutch because you got contribution from Nick Castellanos. You're getting contribution from lower tier guys, but you need the big dogs to show up. If you're going to beat Cleveland, you need everything to fall into place, and you got to have the big dogs show up. And if Ian Kinsler is going to go 0 for 4, you're not going to have too many situations where you're going to come out and win the game. It's not going to happen.
He is a guy that stirs the drink, and I think if he hits, the Tigers are more likely to win. He's been the best two-way player on the Tigers all year long, and he's their club MVP for 2016. No doubt in my opinion. Or in my mind, and that's what we talked about kind of last week, is that he is the best two-way player, and that's what makes it hard to deal him, even if the Tigers, considered selling, which they're not, okay? Remember, they're not going to do that when they're competitive enough to be in the AL wildcard hunt. But I don't know if they would even deal him because of the fact that he is. I mean, the greatest player right now in the Tigers for this single season has been Ian Kinsler, no doubt about it. And then there comes the discussion, maybe for the Hall of Fame one day for Ian Kinsler. But the All-Star game this year, he should definitely be in that All-Star game. And I wanted to kind of, bring up, you got the Indians with a few All-Stars, guys that should be All-Stars. Danny Salazar with the 10 wins, 2.36 ERA, AL best ERA, that great ERA plus 200. He'll be an All-Star for sure for the Indians. And then we haven't even brought him up at all throughout this whole entire series of shows that we've done for Tigers Talk, the man who is Francisco Lindor, the shortstop, young phenom shortstop for the Tribe, who is 22 years old. He is younger than me, Lindor is. He's hit around 300 all year long. He's kind of been the Ian Kinsler for them, the guy that stirs their drink in that lineup, because a lot of the other guys really can't do that and then get on base like Lindor can and play in the field very well. So you got 2 All-Stars there, and probably even more because they're in first place with the 50 wins. Now, how about the Tigers? We've talked about Castellanos. Kinsler should definitely be in. After Kinsler, you might have a guy like Castellanos and Cabby, but who in your mind will make the All-Star game for the Tigers as we near that All-Star break? Doc.
Man, that's a great question. I know that the campaigns are out there for Miggy, for Kinsler. A guy that's probably not going to make the All-Star team, but should get some serious consideration is Fulmer. I mean, he's doing some things. Every time he goes out there, he's giving up 0 or 1 run. He's doing some outstanding type things, and I believe that if he was on the KC Royals, that he'd probably be maybe among the league leaders in votes. But Fulmer is a guy that is really, when you peek in and look at his stats, his advanced numbers, what he's done compared to JV from 2006, you go, oh my gosh.
Fulmer's been better, hasn't he, as a rookie?
He's been outstanding, and it's just been a situation where you go, man, please. So I'm going to wait patiently while I bloviate a little bit, because I'm hoping that it's Fulmer in Game 3. I'm hoping that
he is.
It's Fulmer?
Fulmer, you got it, baby. You got your wish to come true, and he's facing Tomlin, a guy they got to beat. Okay, after what I saw him do to JV, this guy has 9 wins now, Tomlin. Now, 3.21 ERA, so he's been solid. I'll give him that much. But Fulmer's been better.
You know what? That gives me a little bit of hope in that maybe, just maybe, Tuesday's game versus the Tribe, maybe Anibal Sanchez goes 4 solid innings, and if he gets into trouble, Brad Ausmus recognizes it and pulls him out quickly. But just get that second win. And, hey, I think a series win versus Cleveland would be huge for the morale of this team. And maybe just competing that first game of the series might help to propel them, because they're not out of games. They know they got home run power. It's just they got to put it together. And it's just a situation where you just need a couple more things to happen. You need a little bit more throttle on this team. You need Justin Upton to kind of kick it into gear more often. He kicks it into gear, but it's like once a game. It kicks into gear where he gets a key RBI or a key game-winning, game-affecting situation once a week. We need to kick that up a little bit more. You need guys like, McCann, guys like Iglesias
who's
to kind of contribute a little bit more.
Yeah.
He's kicking up a little. Is he above 200 yet?
Yeah, he's hit better. I'll give him that much, Doc.
Okay, so maybe as we're recording this, maybe the fog is lifting over Cleveland, and the Tigers will be able to come back. Now, you kind of gave me a little bit of life. As you said, Fulmer was pitching. I got excited. That's what a young guy like that, when he goes out there, start after start after start, and he can go out there and not give up too many runs, is a flamethrower, and he does it with relative ease. It's like he goes up there and just strikes guys out, gets contact. He's a guy that doesn't get too far behind in counts, and he gets into situations where he's going into the 7th, 8th inning with a relatively low pitch count. So when you said that Fulmer was pitching Game 3...
You got pumped. I could tell.
I got pumped.
That was like a birthday gift. A 4th of July extended weekend birthday, or a gift to you. As it's July 5th, and we have Anibal Sanchez going July 5th against the Indians. That's a big downer, huh? I mean, you go from Fulmer in Game 3... We're all excited about it, right? And we think he can win against Tomlin. But then you have Sanchez going against, of all guys, I mean, every guy in the Indians rotation is solid. But against Carrasco, who's been right up there with Salazar, with Kluber, has a 2.56 ERA. He's been money, man, and he can K batters. Then you have Sanchez, who really can't do that anymore too well. Maybe here and there can make a batter miss. But what a downer, a Debbie Downer when you have him going against this Indians starter in Carlos Carrasco. I think the Tigers, obviously, on paper, they're going to lose Game 2. And I know they played well enough to have a chance to win Game 1 Monday night. But I'm going to say the Tigers lose Game 2, win Game 3, because, hey, Tomlin beat JV, and Tomlin has all these wins, but he's not going to keep winning at this rate. And Fulmer, hey, biggest start of his life, Doc, in the major leagues. The adrenaline will be pumping, will be rushing, I think, throughout his body. So I think he gets it done on the road against the Tribe on Wednesday.
Good. You know what? When you take some time off of podcasting, I just, look down and we've been chatting about the Tigers for 30 minutes. I just feel like we just started.
Right? It's been fun.
Yeah, good fun. So let's take a quick time out, reset a little bit. I can enjoy more of my coffee. We'll come back. Second half of the show should be exciting. We can talk about the injury to Daniel Norris, the injury to Jordan Zimmerman, and we can figure out where the Tigers go from here because, they are going to move on from the series versus Cleveland and then go on to a series versus Toronto. And that could be also a key series, too, later on this week.
And stay with us here on episode 47 of Tigers Talk because we have a lot more coming up. Vito Chirco here for Top Cat Sales in downtown Royal Oak. Looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Then look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan quarterback John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the very highest quality and the very best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going online to TopCatTeamSales.com. Once again, Top Cat Sales' website is TopCatTeamSales.com. And remember to also follow Top Cat Sales on Twitter at Team Top Cat. Vito Chirco back on episode number 47 of the Tigers Talk with Chirco and company. Almost to 50 now, 3 away. I can do math, so we're almost there, and it's a good thing for all of us here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And we are doing this courtesy of Top Cat Sales, courtesy of DetroitSportsNation.com, and really of Doc, John Macron, giving me the shot to do this. So I appreciate all of that. Hope everybody had a great 4th of July. And I know the Tigers did over the weekend until playing the Indians Monday night. And now they get all this injury news about Jordan Zimmerman with the neck strain, 15-day DL, and the right oblique for Daniel Norris. An oblique strain there for Norris. Not good for him, not good for Zimmerman, not good for the Tigers. And now facing the Jays who can mash. Like the most inopportune time for these guys to go on the shelf, Doc.
Exactly. You said it exactly right. Tough time for Jordan Zimmerman, again, like we said before, in that he hasn't spent too much time on the DL. He's had the one major surgery. He's been a guy that's been considered a gamer, and he had such a great start. Some people are arguing that the start that he had to 2016 was Cy Young caliber, that he came out there and was like, whoa, this is the bona fide stud, the number one guy in the rotation. And then he slowed down, and now you're starting to go, oh boy, please don't let this be the reason why Washington was willing to kind of let him go and not re-up him to that massive deal. And then you got Daniel Norris, who we're counting on a little bit to be a piece because we gave up, David Price in the trade. So you want something back, and you want to see maybe not, his first start was awesome. His first career at bat in the major leagues, he hit a home run. So he came with some fanfare, but it's kind of tapered off a little bit. So his momentum in terms of his, status as a prospect kind of slowed down, but I know it's still too early. But Daniel Norris' progress is kind of, halted, and now he's been injured twice with the same right oblique situation. And as of this recording, we don't know the extent of it. Hopefully it's minor. And I think he came out and said that it doesn't feel exactly the same way as the first one. It feels a little bit, it doesn't feel as bad. So maybe he'll only miss 1 or 2 starts. But in oblique situation, you don't know how that's going to affect you. You don't know, how, because you need to definitely have your obliques in strong shape, your core in shape, in order to be an effective pitcher. So the injuries came at the worst possible time. The Tigers just can't afford it. They cannot afford it ahead of a series versus Toronto and ahead of some important series coming up ahead, because the schedule is not super easy if you look at it going forward. So these injuries are a concern to me. I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit concerned with the Tigers in terms of their health. And you do have, like you've said, and we've said it in earlier editions of this podcast, you have aging veterans, Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez. You got guys that have been relatively healthy so far, and Brad Ausmus is trying to do his best to give them rest when needed. But at any given game, they could hurt themselves. So those injuries are tough, and it makes it really tough because when you look at the series coming up versus Toronto, an injury to 2 starters is going to make Brad Ausmus' job super tough, Vito.
Yeah, you have JV going in one of the games. I believe the first game of the 4-game set. It is on the road at Rogers Center in Toronto, where the Blue Jays have a great home field advantage. And now you have the injuries on top of that affecting the Tigers' rotation and who is going to start. And one of the biggest games on paper in terms of who's going to start is who's starting against Aaron Sanchez, the young ace right now of the Blue Jays, who has an ERA below 3. He has come into form, has electric stuff, just turned 24, as I wrote about in the Free Press scouting report that I did on the Tigers for these matchups this week against the Indians and those Blue Jays who we face upcoming this week. And that's a dangerous situation in itself because you got to face Sanchez, who's been great and lights out realistically all year long up to this point, and then you don't even have a set starting pitcher facing him as of right now. As I look at the starting, rotation, alignment, and guys starting in the series against the Jays, I saw JV, like I said, but who is starting against Sanchez? That's a big game, a game where you might get not shut out per se, or you might actually get shut out legitimately and not score a run, but it could be a game where you score 2 or 3, which means your starting pitcher going in that game for the Tigers has to be on point. Doc has to go 6 or 7 and allow only 2-3 runs himself. If he allows more than that, you're probably not going to win that ball game on the road in Toronto against Aaron Sanchez. So that's a scary matchup in itself, and that'll be on Saturday, July 9th. So in one of the last games of the series, which if that's a game you have to win to even salvage a split in the series, well, that's a scary thought as well, Doc.
Now, I'm very fascinated in that, as you were talking, I was thinking about momentum, and I really thought that after a 4-game sweep versus Seattle, after a 4-game sweep versus Tampa Bay, that the Tigers would have some momentum. And I think momentum carries over in between series in that some games, you can have some comebacks, and, the first game versus Tampa Bay, you have that epic comeback, and that carries you into the series sweep. But once you start that new series versus Cleveland, it's like a whole new series. And so I was fascinated to get your take on that sweep versus Tampa Bay. In that, do you give them credit for sweeping a team? It's super hard to do. Going on the road and sweeping a team. You were able to sweep Seattle at home. So is it something you give credit, or a lot of people, when they go based on this season, when they see the Tigers have success, they're going, well, you know what? The Tigers are whooping up on the garbage teams, and when they face quality opponents, they're not as good. So the perception of the club is it's just, a middle of the road team that has the capability of beating bad teams, but is in the lower echelon of, better major league clubs. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment because it's who are they beating, right? When they are winning these games, and they've won a good amount now to this point, but it's more about who they have and who they haven't then beaten too. When you look at the grand scheme of things for the Tigers and their schedule and results up to this point and going into the All-Star break, it's the case where, well, the Tigers really haven't beaten those strong foes that are going to make the playoffs this year. You got to start beating those foes now. And in your division as well, head-to-head with the Indians, obviously. And I think salvaging a game in the series against the Indians will happen, but 2 out of 3 I think is unlikely because of Sanchez on the mound in Game 2. And then against the Jays, if you don't win, with JV on the mound, then you got to go into the rest of the series with, an unknown starting pitcher on Saturday, and facing Sanchez, a game you're probably not going to win. So if you don't win JV start, don't win that game against Aaron Sanchez of the Jays, which you probably won't, let's say, with an unknown starting pitcher there going into that game. Well, that's 2 losses already, so you're just going for a split, best case scenario against the Blue Jays. So I would say it is a fair assessment, what you said, though, Doc, to sum it all up. The Tigers have struggled against the really good, stand-outish teams that are going to be at the top of the division by the end of the season and or already are at this point, Doc.
Okay, so I guess the age-old adage is that the Tigers are what their record shows them to be. They're a team that is around 500, can beat up bad teams, and when you get into their series, versus Tampa, versus the teams that are in the bottom half of their divisions, you should be able to compete and win the majority of those games. But the important situation then, the question you got to ask is, what's it going to take for them to move from a middle-of-the-road ball club to compete with Cleveland, to compete with Kansas City, to compete with Baltimore, to compete with the teams that are at the top of their divisions? What's it going to take? What couple moves should they make? What is it going to take for this Detroit Tigers team to move from being a middle-of-the-road club? Because you would think with the talent that they have that it's a club that should be around upper echelon. But, is it just merely the fact that the starting staff has just really killed the momentum of the season? Because the offense has really kind of picked it up and they've done their job, but maybe not too consistently versus teams that have been better. What do they need to do
Well, you know what?
to move up in echelon?
It's hitting against, if you hit superbly as a unit, which Tigers have, well, you got to do it against these strong starting pitching staffs, too, like the Indian starting pitching staff, where, McCann picked it up, has of late, but who is he doing the production against, right? Who is that he's hitting against at an efficient rate at the plate? Well, if it's going to be clubs only like the Rays who are under 500, well, then you're not going to win many games against the big upper echelon clubs like the Indians at the top of the AL Central. So, and you got to start doing that more consistently. And you need luck on your side, Doc. You always do it in any sport that you play, in any realm of life, right? In any job, any opportunity that life presents you with. So I got to say luck is a big key as well, and you can't control that. And then you also need some momentum, which is a part of the luck factor. How can you carry the momentum in an efficient manner? Can you do so, successfully from series to series? And the Tigers are winning the way they did on last Thursday against the Rays, and then sweeping the Rays on the road in Tampa. That was great and all. But the thing is, that was against Tampa, a middling ball club at the bottom of the AL East. So you got to carry that momentum now to this Indian series, which is a series where you have a tougher, stiffer competition. And that's where it becomes hard to carry that momentum. And that's where it becomes, too, I want to say this, Doc, the case where momentum really is only as good as your next day's starting pitcher. I think Sparky Anderson, somebody came up with that motto, and other managers have carried that mentality and motto as well, along with them. And I think Jim Leyland even, said that, uttered that phrase when he was a manager of the Tigers, that the momentum that you have from one series to the next is only as good, truly, as your next day's starting pitcher. If your starting pitcher gets blown up the next day because he's of poor quality or just doesn't have his A-quality stuff, well, that's on him and not on any kind of momentum, which you can't control, along with that luck factor. But you need those two things, the luck factor, which accompanies momentum that you carry from series to series, and they need that more often now against these bigger upper echelon ball clubs like the Indians and the Jays coming up this weekend. And then also, well, you need a stronger rotation to compete head-to-head with the Danny Salazars of the world, okay? With the Carlos Carrascos, the Corey Klubers of the world, of the Aaron Sanchez's of the world, who is, the ace, as I said, of the Jays. You need guys to compete head-to-head with them, and right now the Tiger staff is being deteriorated by injury. It has been, now of late, decimated to a certain extent, at least, with Zimmerman going on the DL. Daniel Norris leaving a start on Monday with the oblique strain. So now you got JV and Fulmer, and who else? You can't carry a team, have a team be carried by two starting pitchers, and that's all. You can't have that. And if that's the case, well, that's all she wrote then for your season, realistically. And that's what the Tigers have to upgrade and have to do it quickly. But they also have to get healthy there, have to get healthy in that starting rotation, with Zimmerman. And they need a guy like Norris to step up after the All-Star break to really regain full health, if it's in him to do so, and to do it then so we have him for the stretch run, to make a run for, the division crown, for the AL pennant, for all of that. And it's not going to happen with only two starting pitchers. They need 4 quality starting arms, and then you get into the playoffs and you have a solid 1 through 4. And that's all it takes in the postseason to have success. And not a lackluster bullpen, which they have had in the past. But I think if they get into the postseason, this team is more readily equipped to make a run than it has been in the past too, Doc, with that being said. And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think they would be more equipped if they make that addition of an arm or two for the rotation, and they get Zimmerman healthy, a guy like Norris healthy as well. Then you have a strong 1 through 5 as long as Fulmer keeps pitching well, though. And Verlander, how about his health? That's also a factor. Can he stay healthy for the second half of the season? Remember last year, he wasn't healthy for the first half there, and didn't pitch well, and like he was healthy until the second half of 2015. So now we need a healthy JV all season. So in the second half of 2016 too, and we need a healthy and consistently productive Michael Fulmer as a rookie in the second half of 2016. Can we get that out of him without an innings limit striking him in the rear, and then killing the Tigers any momentum that they could carry in that rotation from this portion of the season, from July 5th and on? That's where it scares me, Doc. Now, the lack of strength has been talked about ad nauseum here on this podcast, but also the innings limit, Doc. And do you think they will implement that for Michael Fulmer? That's another big topic of discussion for the Tigers.
That's something that everybody's talking about. A lot of people are like, wow, this is a guy, Fulmer, that doesn't have really a track record of really extended innings. And it brings to light the age-old debate that a lot of old-timers have, in that, hey, we threw and threw and threw. We threw over 200 innings. We never had all these problems, and now these guys are getting coddled. You have pitch counts. You have a rash of injuries. But I think the factor that people are missing is that these guys are bigger, stronger, faster, in that they're throwing with much more velocity, and they start throwing curveballs, and they have more wear and tear on their arm at earlier ages. But Michael Fulmer, it's one of those things where the Tigers have to find that fine balance of figuring out when to use the throttle and to ramp him up versus when to kind of save him, because he's a relatively young cat, and they don't want to potentially jeopardize a guy and get him messed up with arm injuries early. So I do believe they should limit his innings, and they should definitely be careful. And I like the fact that what they did in extending his the time between his starts and rest him up a little bit. So I think that's a good idea. I think they should use that, throughout the second half of the season, is maybe just in between a couple starts, give him an extra 5 days, maybe, 10 days in between starts. Let his arm rest. Don't pull, don't let it go to full throttle, because you also have to look to the future. And this guy could be a 200 inning guy relatively quickly. It's just that you don't go from pitching like 80 innings in one season to 200. It's just you have to kind of slow it down a little bit. I know people are excited, but I agree with what the Tigers are doing so far. I mean, this is a guy with talent, and you want to secure it. But on the other end, I do also appreciate the argument that says, hey, why are you living your life in fear? Let it go and see that maybe this is a guy with a special arm that won't ever break down, and he could start going 150, 160 right now. They have their number. I think they're handling it the right way.
What do you think the innings limit will be for Michael Fulmer? What is that innings number going to be, you think?
Didn't I hear around between 150 and 170?
I would say 150, and that's usually what it is anyways, Doc. I would say 150. You might get above 150, but I would take 150. If this was a bet, that he'll get to 150 for his innings this season, and then they'll go and periodically skip a start. As they skipped one of his starts already, which was wise in the first half, and then in the second half, he might get skipped more often. The thing is, we need him pitching more. But the thing is, in high leverage situations, how will his arm handle it? With more pressure, right? More pressure on his arm. Will he be able to handle all of that pressure in the second half of the season? That is a topic realistically for another day, though, for the Tigers. Now, another youngster who has performed great of late is Steven Moya. How about him in the corner outfield spot? Not the best defensively, but with the power, hitting a home run Monday night. He did that against the Indians. And it looked like because of his power there, and what they did to tie it up at 3, that they had a legitimate shot, and they did. They did because of home runs like that hit by Moya, who has hit. He is hitting right now the 950 OPS. That's a great on-base plus slugging.
Yeah, let's hold on 1 second on Moya. I got some thoughts about him because he's a guy that made a key blunder in Monday's game. It looks like his batting is what's going to keep him on the team, but he's got to improve upon his defense.
He can't feel, man, like I said.
Looks like he's got lead in his legs, man. He's
lead in his
slow.
behind. He can't move. He's moving with lead in his behind. That's why he's moving so slow, I think, too, at times.
It's quite obvious. I mean, the announcers on the radio, everyone's seeing it going like, man, he needs just to develop more reps, more instincts. I think that'll help him in that he kind of just maybe is thinking a little bit too much out there in the outfield. Now, I asked a question on our Twitter page.
Yes, sir.
At Detroit Podcast, and I tweeted out there, I said, what do the Detroit Tigers need to improve upon to compete with upper echelon teams? And we got a fairly good response. The two most notable ones is at Cup of Joe in the D writes in, need 2 more starting pitchers, JD Martinez to come back. The team needs to stay healthy and play inspired baseball. Michael Traylor tweets us, better starting pitching and bullpen. Unfortunately, the same answers that should have been solved since 2006. So a lot of people have sent, messages along the same light in that if you fix this starting rotation, if they can improve and the bullpen improve, you might be looking at a team, if you can find the right pieces to bring in and execute, you might be looking at a team that can shoot up into the upper echelon of the major leagues in the second half of the season. They have the talent. They have the ability to execute, which is good. But I think with knowing, Vito, that they have that talent and they're so close, it's the same adage. So close, yet so far away. So doesn't anybody stay in one place? But anyways, the Tigers are in a situation where they need to be able to find consistency across every aspect of the club, and maybe, just maybe, when they start playing these better teams, do some damage. And maybe some moves need to be made. It's on Avila's now. The ball's in his court. What are you going to do, bro? And with Steven Moya, you got to just keep him out there, spell him when you need to, but his bat's keeping him in the lineup. He's got a strong capability to mash the baseball, and it's starting to slowly but surely show itself. But again, he's got to be an everyday guy. which he isn't. He's not going
And
to be.
he's not. I don't think he'll ever be that because of poor defense. He can't even judge a ball out there. Then he moves so slowly.
So you think
he's
Steven
all
Moya
legs?
will not be an everyday player for this Detroit Tigers
Will never
team?
be for anybody, I think.
Does
He'll
he
be a
have
good
trade
quality
value?
bat as a fourth outfielder, and he has trade value because of his power, but he has to keep hitting for pop. If he has no pop in his bat, if it disappears at some point in his career, he's done as a major leaguer. Easy as that, because that's all he's living on right now. He's living and dying by the power. Doc.
Okay, now I'm a little bit gun shy because you spanked me and you looked at me with a look of devastation the last time I threw out a trade proposal, and it stuck with me. You think I have this brave front, but I'm a little bit sensitive. And so with you looking at me like that last week when I proposed the Kinsler trade to the Yankees, hurt my feelings. So I'm going to try it again.
I'm sorry, Doc. Let me get the tissue out for you.
I'm going to tread lightly. All right. Would you potentially make a move? Because I obviously just saw a team get spanked, and they don't look like they're going anywhere. They might be sellers. Steven Moya for Chris Archer or Steven Moya for Drew Smiley? You make that
Absolutely, but do the Rays do it? No. And Archer was their ace, going into the season. Now, Archer hasn't been an ace caliber arm. He hasn't been.
Okay, so Moya and sprinkle in
who?
Jimenez for Archer to start, or
I don't know. That's a big question. You might get. So I think they still value Archer higher than you would think based on his stats for 2016.
The problem with Archer is, though, why can't he start faster? I mean, literally, he's got the JV syndrome down pat, like diagnosable. He struggles. Like, did you see his start versus the Tigers? The Tigers tattooed him a little bit in his first, couple at bats, and all of a sudden he got in trouble, and then he reared back and started throwing 96 and got everybody out.
He has it in him.
He's got good stuff.
That's why the Rays, they see that. They're not going to deal him because of that. I bet he's still not available. And then Drew Smiley is probably more available, but I still think they would be gun shy on making a deal of him because he's under contract, all that kind of jazz. When they're cheap, those guys with the Rays, man, they keep those guys until they really have to trade them. So I think it would take a lot. And you added Joe Jimenez, which makes it more enticing for the Rays to do a deal like that, of dealing, from the Tigers standpoint, dealing Moya, as you said, and then Jimenez. That makes it more enticing for the Rays, and the Rays might pull the trigger then. But I still think they'd be a little bit gun-shy, even on Smiley. And then for the Tigers, to get him back, a reunion probably would work out. And the Rays, though, might not want to give the Tigers a chance to have that reunion yet. So in so many words, I bet those deals would not happen. And the Rays more than likely would not entertain either, and definitely would not entertain the idea of dealing Archer at this point for only those two guys. If they're going to deal Archer, I would think they would want his value to be higher. I'll just say that much. They want his value to be sky high as it was last year before they deal Archer to another ball club. That's my opinion on that, on those two trade ideas of yours. And you know what? They're better than last week.
So the best way to say it is great trade idea, Doc, just not probably going to be
Thank you for the trade idea. Great stuff. Appreciate that idea, too. Is that good enough?
Moving towards where we need to be in terms of realistic. So I started off terribly. This one was not so bad. So listen, what are you going to do? You have to look at ways to improve, and you never know. You never know what these clubs are thinking, and as long as the telephone lines are open, I know Al Avila. I have a good feeling that he's going to make a move. I just don't know if the move is going to pan out. So I can't wait to see and evaluate.
Now, how about my boy Fernando Rodney getting dealt? He did get dealt. We talked about it before, and he's gone. He's not going to be dealt to the Tigers now, more than likely. He could have been a guy.
Vito, sometimes it's interesting what these managers do, and sometimes they outthink themselves. Fernando Rodney, did you see his first appearance with the Marlins, his new team? Everyone knows that he's, a closer, a guy that's been brought by, he was from the Padres, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy that has great stats in the ninth inning. So what do the Marlins do? They bring him in the eighth inning, his first appearance, and he didn't do so well. He kind of racked up give up some runs. But I think Fernando Rodney is a guy that can be an effective pitcher, but he's a creature of habit. Bring him in the ninth. Marlins, easy advice. He's a guy that's effective. They brought him in a little early, and he struggled. It was very interesting to see. But, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Fernando Rodney's having a good year. You would have liked to have seen him on the Tigers, but it just didn't work out.
It didn't. You know what? Some guys struggle going from from one role to another in the bullpen too. Specifically, using an example from last season when the Nats dealt for Jonathan Papelbon. Do you remember that? They got Papelbon, and they had him become the closer instead of Drew Storm, who was closing out games for the Nats at a sufficient rate. Storm was moved to the eighth inning subsequently with Papelbon in the ninth, and Storm, he declined with his production. Wasn't the same after that move was made by the Nats last year, and the Nats, had that slide, huge slide in the second half where they missed out on the playoffs too, and it cost Matt Williams his job, and that's why Dusty Baker's there now. And the Nats have been succeeding a little bit more of late, and we're not going to talk about the Nats here, but that was just one specific example where, as you said with Fernando Rodney there, changing up the role a tad there, and maybe going to another club changes the guy's, I don't know, the mindset. It puts more pressure on the guy too, where he went from San Diego, who's a non-competitive ball club, and has been for a long time, it seems like now, and then goes to Miami. Not the biggest pressure there in Miami because the fans don't show up and don't really care about that ball club, and that's proven in the attendance numbers. But the Marlins have more to play for right now because they've been more competitive in 2016. So maybe with the more pressure on Rodney, he won't succeed at the highest rate, or at as high of a rate as he did with the Pots. So there is that to also, and always really to take into account with guys that are trade acquisitions, as we get closer to the non-waiver trade deadline, which has been moved, by the way, Doc, in 2016, only for 2016, from July 31st to August 1st, because July 31st is a Sunday. They wanted it on a weekday, so it gets moved subsequently by Commissioner Manfred to Monday, August 1st. And now we will see what kind of trades the Tigers will make, as I know they will be entertaining a lot of offers and be very active on the open market and trying to make a deal before that deadline. And probably they'll make a deadline on Monday, August 1st as well. And if history proves itself to be accurate, an accurate now indicator of what the Tigers will do going forward, you could say they will make a move on August 1st too. So, and we've seen the Tigers make some quality moves in the past under Dave D's leadership. Now, this is his big test, right? Alavila, what will he do? We think we know what he's going to do, but now it's about the quality of those moves and how they pan out for the Tigers in the second half of the season. So a lot to live up to because of what Dave D established when making moves, because a lot of his moves were A++, or at least B+ quality, which is always better than losing a deal, because when you lose a deal, that means the quality of the trade is below a C. It's not even average, in my opinion, Doc. And, Doc, there are many trade candidates out there, too, and we'll hear more and more trade rumors as we get closer to that non-waiver deadline on Monday, August 1st. And the thing is the quality, but we don't know. We got to judge it after the fact. And sometimes, in evaluating deals, Doc, as a baseball guy and watching these deals go down, it's about really what happens in the long-term future for these deals. You can't really have that snap judgment on deals either. And it's easy to make those snap judgments, as you could have maybe with Yoenis Cespedes in that deal, and how he ended up doing so well for the Mets in the second half of the year and led them to the playoffs. They had the great World Series run there, almost capped it off with a World Series title. But then you look at what the Tigers got in Fulmer. That's why you can have win-win deals, and why realistically you can't even evaluate whether a team won or lost a deal until long after the fact, Doc.
Okay. It's going to be a fun week again heading into this trade deadline. And right now, listen, what you do is what you're known to do. If they're playing against bad opponents, get those wins, because, hey, if you sweep teams like Tampa Bay, it gives you that buffer where if you struggle against Cleveland, hey, it's been up and down throughout the year. They know it. They might address it going forward, and it might help out the ball club. But, hey, if that's what you're known to do right now, keep it up. Don't start in the pattern of losing to teams that you're supposed to beat. And that helps you remember, that record. It is a little bit telling. 44-29 versus the rest of the league, 0-10 versus Cleveland. So there is a makings of some things where you can say, okay, there are some positives here, and let's just accentuate that, add to the team, get maybe one starter, one bullpen arm, and hopefully they deliver. All right, Vito, that time of the show, what are we hitting them with?
The Buster of the Week, and then your Toast of the Town. And the struggling Zimmerman is my Buster of the Week. Hitting the DL now, has not been sharp in his most recent outings, and he's easily, because of that, Doc, my Buster of the Week. Now, for you.
What?
Well, yeah, I know it's kind of offensive to him, right, or to people that love Zimmerman because he's going on the DL, and you think to yourself, well, come on, cut him some slack here. But look at what he's done recently. Now, 4 earned runs, 7 earned runs before that, and one nice start in between. 2 other outings where he allowed 4 and then 7 earned runs. So 7 earned runs. And how many of his recent outings? Let's see. In 2 of his 5 last outings before hitting the DL, he allowed 7 earned runs. That gets you a spot on the Buster of the Week totem pole, which is now lengthy at this point. And now, getting to you and your Toast of the Town. Who is making the cut for that this week, Doc?
All credit to Ian Kinsler. You see his impact, and a guy that earned his 200th career home run, a guy that really, when you thought about it, Texas gave up on him too soon. I know his contract is a little bit expansive, and he's an older player, but hey, with age comes experience, and with age may become some leadership. I think Ian Kinsler is really emerging as leader of this team, and is a guy that when he's on, man, he gets some key hits. He can stir that drink with the offense, and a guy that earned his 200th career home run, has kept it going this year. probably should be an all-star, but, you got to give him credit. Toast to the town, having a little Tito's with the doc.
Wow, Tito's handmade vodka?
Hell yeah.
There you go. Really
Plus,
living it up.
I don't even know because I don't drink it that much. I don't even know the prices. Is that more of a lower-end vodka or middle-aged?
I think it's middle end, actually.
Okay,
I think it
middle end.
is. So it's not too expensive. You can afford it, too.
That's our humble level at the podcast. Middle. That's where I want us to be. So, well, for the time being, we'll bust out the Tito's for the Toast of the Town. So the Toast of the Town for this week, after the holiday and for his performance, Ian Kinsler.
So Tito's for Ian, for Vito, and for Doc. And with that, Doc, we're shutting down shop here on episode 47 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Good luck to the Tigers this week, the rest of this week against the Tribe, and then against the Blue Jays. Hopefully they come up with, 2 out of 3 against the Tribe and a split of the series against the Jays. Doc, we'll talk to you and everybody else, all our listeners too, next week for episode 48 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Have a great one. Until then, goodbye.